You likely have a portion of your desk set aside for one of these. From our informal studies, few people know how to program it, but almost everyone knows how to use it. Back in the good old days, they were sturdy, and slamming one of them would produce a brief ring. Now the bells are gone, but they're a lot smarter and know how to cancel echo, compress voice, and directly connect to your company data network. Can you guess what we're talking about in today's episode? Yes, today we're talking about the business telephone, a device that was ubiquitous in the workplace that has taken on a completely new role as part of business collaboration. During this episode, we are joined by one of the key contributors to their evolution, Jeff Rodman, as we talk about how the business telephones got smart, really smart, so stick around. Welcome to Telecom Disruptors, a podcast that takes a closer look at the people and technology that is changing the way the world communicates. I'm Alan Percy, your podcast host, and joining me today is Jeff Rodman, one of the founders of Polycom, a company that many will recognize as a leader in the business telephone and video conferencing systems. Jeff joins me during Enterprise Connect 2019 from his home office in San Francisco. So Jeff, thanks for spending a few minutes with us today. I'm at Enterprise Connect, and my apologies if it's a little bit noisy here. As you can imagine, finding a quiet spot in a trade show is always a challenge.
That always is, yeah. I don't envy you that challenge.
Yes, great. Well, Jeff, you and I have known each other for many, many years. It goes way back to our discussions about high-fidelity phones and quality voice conversations. And one of the things that I've found has been really fascinating is the story of how IP phone and the communications endpoints came to be, because they didn't start out obviously as IP-based endpoints. A lot of this technology started out when we were still doing twisted pair. I'd love to have you share just a quick summary of how the endpoint device got its start.
Well, Polycom, as you know, had a long route back to our previous days with PictureTel back in the mid-1980s when we were just developing what became leading edge and now is pretty much the standard for video conferencing. But a lot of the work that we had done there was also focused on audio performance. So when Polycom's co-founders, Brian and I, started talking about what the world needed next, we realized that there had come to be so much focus in the industry on video that people had sort of lost sight of how important the sound was. If you can't understand each other, hear each other, there's not a lot of point to having a really good video image. So we said, how about if we put together something, if we formed a company whose focus was not just on video, but on all the ways that people collaborate. And that was the reason for the name Polycom, right? Every mode of communication, with the concept being, we will eventually go back to including video and content as well as audio. But let's start with what we can do as, we'd like to build the world's best audio collaboration device. And that's what turned into the Polycom sound station, the Starfish that people know and love. So we started with that, and we continued developing that, came up with several versions of that, all pots connected. To your point, everything was twisted pair back in those days. And it wasn't until a few years later that we started taking advantage of what the internet had to offer.
And I imagine, and I'm sure most folks who've been in a conference room in the last 10 or 15 years know about, we nickname it maybe the Frisbee phone, the desktop or tabletop conferencing device with a keypad on it, obviously be able to make and receive telephone calls. It's pretty almost ubiquitous in office spaces today. Some of the hurdles with a device like that was the speakerphone technology, right? The echo cancellation and then gain control and producing high fidelity. And maybe a little peek underneath the covers. How did it not only that come to be, but what else inside that little secret sauce in that?
It's interesting that you're focusing on that side because a lot of what happens there is almost independent of what kind of network connection you have. Doing good, very very high quality open air conferencing, open air conversation is a real challenge. One of the first problems that you run into is that in normal conversation, we have, we're talking back and forth. We can talk over each other. And that's what makes for normal conversation. An airplane pilot or in the military, you might push a button on the microphone. You'd say your thing. You'd say over, you release the mic. That's not how conversations go. And that's not how collaboration works best. You want to be able to just talk freely, everyone in the call. If you have an open air situation where you've got a microphone and a speaker and they can see each other, hear each other, if what you do is you just turn them both on, you immediately get feedback. The speaker goes into the microphone and people at both ends of the call go crazy. So that the only real solution for that to maintain transparency is what's called an acoustic echo canceller. And that is a digital algorithm. It's a signal processing that looks at the signal at the sound that it just sent out the loudspeaker, knows some form of that is going to be coming back in the microphone, and actively subtracts it as it happens. So you wind up being able to pick up whoever in the room is talking and ignoring the sound of your own speaker. And that makes all of the difference in the world. That was one of the most distinguishing factors, it has been really, about Polycom's product. It has been the quality of audio, our ability to convey speech both ways in an open air setting. So that was part of the sound station we used. In the original sound station, we used a DSP, a signal processing microchip that AT&T had developed for their digital switch inside their own company. So we were able to buy these, and it was a very capable little processor for the time. And we put the entire echo canceller and all of the unit software on there. The other nice thing about the sound station, besides behaving so well with speech, was that it was really, really simple to operate. You just push the button, you've got a phone connection. You dial, people answer at the other end, hopefully, and you start talking. And people love that about it also. They gave them access to really leading edge technology in a really not leading edge technology way of interacting, just very human.
I'd imagine there's probably some other technologies in the speech processing too, right? So, as a musician, I'm sure you've run into it, and most folks who work in sound know about equalization compressors that equalize out the sound. Is that part of what was included in there?
Yes, it is. That's a very good point. Because of the unusual way that we were mounting microphones as part of the physical acoustic design of the thing, we did some reshaping of the microphone performance. We applied noise cancellation, noise reduction algorithms, and we also, because it's an open air pickup, and you could have people sitting at all positions on a conference table, we do apply some very intelligent gain compensation, so that the person at the far end of the table sounds as good as the one sitting right in front of the speakerphone.
Right. And a combination of those things in what then was pretty primitive telephone world was obviously very innovative, and so it created quite a few fans, I'll call it, along the way. I think most everyone, like I said, recognizes that that form factor, sitting on a desk with its position in the conference room as being almost ubiquitous. So along comes this IP technology, where now we're going to take voice and we're not just going to put it on the twisted pair on a regular telephone line. Now all of a sudden we're going to digitize it, put it in packets. And how did that affect the technology, or what innovations had to come to make that happen?
Certainly, the whole internet interface, Ethernet interface, was new to the speakerphone, and part of the problem that we had to solve was the fact that, especially then, the internet was not as reliable as it is now. Not saying it's perfectly reliable as we all know, but packet dropouts were a very common problem, and they would interrupt the speech. So we had to do some additional development to compensate for that, drops in both directions. On the other hand, once we had an internet connection, we weren't limited to the capabilities of the twisted pair phone line. We weren't limited to a 3.5 kilohertz audio. So one of the innovations, I think we were probably the first to do this, was we were very active in introducing wideband audio, which is sometimes called HD voice, high definition voice. But that turned out to be a very big win, because having the additional fidelity, instead of 3.5, you get twice that, makes a huge difference in being able to understand the other person. Not only understand normal speech in a conference room, but when you start adding noise sources around them, or when you have people talking who have different native languages. So to one person in a conversation, another one may sound like they've got a very heavy accent and be difficult to understand. Well, that situation is much eased if you can hear more of the speech, if you can hear those higher frequencies, because that's where you find the difference between the sound of a Z and the sound of an S, or the sound of a T like tango or a D like delta. And so speech is much more natural when you can have fuller fidelity. So that was one of the big things that the internet connection enabled. Interestingly, wideband voice, high definition voice, had become kind of the standard of the industry for video conferencing for several years. It wasn't until we connected our phones to the internet that it became a common ability for audio conferencing and audio communication.
And I think most everyone who's been on a Skype call or even WhatsApp or many of the other IP-based communication platforms, I think they've gotten a chance to experience not only the high quality voice, but the video that goes along with it. And they maybe almost unconsciously recognize the improved voice quality that has, I'll call it, maybe leaked into the market, sometimes ceremoniously, sometimes unceremoniously, but it's dramatically improved the ability to understand and to help people communicate especially as you mentioned, in either English or second language situations or in noisy environments. So I know my own personal experience has improved dramatically over the years. I guess we can owe some of that to some of the work that you and your team at Polycom have done in researching and making that an initiative.
Yeah, we have been very involved in the standards community, and had a special focus in audio performance. We introduced the codec that became G.722.1, which we call internally Siren, which was a very efficient wideband codec.
Oh, that's good. Well, appreciate your contribution on that front. So now we've built the modern IP phone, right? It's now obviously it's got microphones in it. It's an appliance that sits on the network and has an IP address, and has much higher fidelity audio, and of course, along now, other things like improved displays, appearance buttons, and a lot of other functions get squeezed into these devices, and they've grown. And here, honestly, at Enterprise Connect, some of the IP phones run Android operating systems, et cetera, et cetera. So they become much more than just a phone, quote unquote, but a communications appliance. And that's been some of the innovations I'm sure that you've been involved in, or the company's been involved in over the last couple of years.
That's right, and it's a very active field. One of the things that's happening, as you know, is the whole definition of what a workplace is has been changing very rapidly. So as that happens, it also means that what people need in a desktop instrument, or I guess what I'd say is a workplace instrument, the needs vary, not just because time is moving, but because the range of places that people are working is varying. Is very broad. It used to be everybody went into an office and sat down, and that's where you were. If you met, you went into a conference room. So you really had a fairly limited set of needs that you had to address. That's obviously not the case anymore. You are, we're on this conference. You are at a trade show doing business. I am in a home office in San Francisco doing business. I have an open space cubicle at my Polycom headquarters in San Jose, and we have offices. We have all these different environments, and each one calls for a different set of solutions. So one of the great things that has happened, the development last year of Polycom and Plantronics coming together, was that finally put the entire spectrum of solutions in one coordinated place. So with Plantronics had been focused largely on the personal devices, on the headsets and headphones. Polycom was more group-oriented systems, desktop phones, conference rooms, and having the entire range of those available means that wherever people are talking from, wherever they're trying to get business done, our combination company can solve that.
Yeah, it certainly has. I think we've seen the integration of the headset and the desktop device certainly is an important step, right? That brings buttons and controls from the handset onto the ear or into the ear in some cases, right? Speech powered or speech enabled earphone devices that can control either your mobile device or your desktop device that can integrate with the two. It's really integrated a lot of those separate technologies and created one single user experience, which I'm sure has improved efficiency and the ability of people to be able to manage their time and be able to work from anywhere in any place. So it certainly has improved it. So I'm curious, here at Enterprise Connect, Monday, we got a surprise email that said that Polycom and Plantronics are now using a common new name. And do you want to share a little bit about that new name?
Yes. There, as you would imagine, two companies with what the names had in common, of course, was they both started with P and diverged from there. So when companies go through this, there are always the questions of should we just sort of smush them together and do Polytronics or Plantcom? Should we make everything Plantronics? Should we make everything Polycom? Should we call it Schwartz Tool and Die? Come up with an entirely new name. Yeah. And I think that the solution that the really talented people came up with for that was just genius. The company name is Poly, P-O-L-Y. It's short. It turns out we were actually we have a website, poly.com. And it's, by itself, it's a Greek word that means many.
Right.
And it symbolizes a lot of different manys. It's, on one hand, it's the full range of products from the very personal to the full environment, walk-in conference rooms and that sort of thing. In another respect, it symbolizes the ways that people communicate with voice and video and audio and text. And it also symbolizes the different kind of connections you might want to have. Sometimes you're working by yourself, and Polycom can, or Poly, excuse me, I have to correct myself. Poly can aid in individual collaboration, but it also is obviously a key part of person-to-person remote communications.
Sure.
And group to group or person to group, and of course multi-point. So you could fill I have filled a half a page with different interpretations of what we are poly about. And it all reflects, it comes back to the point that people want to work the way they want to work. And they don't want to have to make a list of, okay, I'll limit myself to this one way of doing it because that's all this device can do. That keeps the challenge interesting, staying out of people's way and letting them get done what they want to get done.
Fantastic. Peeking ahead into the future a little bit, obviously with a brand new name and with Polycom, maybe you could share with us just some visionary thoughts on where personal and collaborative communications is going from here. So we got these devices. We've now unified the headset and the device. We've got some video capabilities. Where's all this going from here?
Well, I think it's going to continue growing. As I said, the sort of expansion of how you define a workplace is making a very big difference. As people are wanting to maintain, a couple of the things that come up when you're talking about business communication as opposed to personal is there is an additional need for security and for reliability and robust operation that sometimes is lacking from fully personal devices. So one of the areas that we've always been very conscious of and continue to improve is in those areas. We also have been putting a lot of focus on some of our partnerships because since Polycom is not in the service provider business, we don't do the network. We think the best business model is one where we focus on those things we do best and take advantage of things that other people do best that we can connect to. And so that's pretty significant. So that part of the business is also continuing to grow. We've got some excellent relationships with we've been a partner of Microsoft for a long time, and there are others that are out there that we're partnered with.
Yep. Well, even though it's certainly I think your dream of video enabling businesses back from your PictureTel days has very much come true. The power of voice is probably stronger now than it's ever been. There's a lot of, I'm sure, the vision you might have had in the early days has come to fruition in front of your eyes. And what's that feel like to be able to see a lot of this come together?
I just love seeing people able to use the stuff that we do, to be part of, to be able to contribute to the success of so many millions of users. it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it has been. It's been a great journey, and appreciate all your contributions, and obviously all your coworkers put a lot of blood and sweat into this, and it shows the results are there. So I want to thank you again, and thanks for spending a few minutes with us today and sharing the story.
Certainly, Alan. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Enjoy the show as long as you're there.
I will. Thank you very much. All right. Have a great day.
Okay. You too. Bye-bye.
A few reminders. If you'd like to share your thoughts or comments, you can find us on Twitter @TelcoBridges. There's more great content on telecom disruptors every week or so be sure to subscribe, ensuring you don't miss any of the new episodes. This episode is sponsored by Telco Bridges, makers of FreeSBC session border controller software and high-performance media and signaling gateways. For more on Telco Bridges, visit telcobridges.com.